bench, I have a rolled up yoga mat, but you can also use a pillow. I have a handled band and I have a mini band. You don't necessarily need the mini band. A lot of this equipment we can adjust on the fly based on stuff you have at home as well. So as we go through, I will help you sort out what home equipment you can swap out and what home with home supplies, like a pillow, for example. Okay, so we're actually going to start with that rolled up yoga mat. Oh, let me lower this just a little bit so you guys can see me on the floor. Go. Okay. If you don't have a rolled up yoga mat, a pillow works fine. A towel roll also works. You are going to take a mini band. If you don't have it, you don't absolutely need it for this exercise. It just helps give a little bit more resistance. That rolled item is going to go in your knees. Knees are coming to 90 degrees. And then I have the yoga block for a pillow. So pillow from home works as well. We're going to think about big full inhale, big full exhale, tightening that core. You should kind of feel those obliques lift off the floor slightly. Then you're going to press your knee down into whatever you have rolled up as you lift that top foot. Okay, now I have my thumb in the front of my thigh, in and around that hip flexor. And I'm just making sure that it is not kicking in to help make this movement happen. We want it nice and relaxed. So as you press down with that knee, exhale, lift that top foot. Press down with the knee, lift at that top foot. If you're struggling to keep the press with the knee as you lift that foot, then just practice squeezing with your knees. Squeeze and release, squeeze and release. And then as you get better at that, you can then start adding the leg lift. Okay, 12 on your own count. Keeping that core connection, making sure you're really using back here to help internally rotate at the hip. Nothing in the front of the leg is kicking in to help. Okay, sometimes if you kind of like push your thumb into that hip flexor, it keeps that hip flexor out of it versus just kind of seeing if it's trying to kick in. Every once in a while it tries to kick in and I just push back and tell it not to. Usually when that happens, I feel my back body a little bit extra, which is where we want it. Really squeeze and lift. It's not a huge range of motion by any stretch. Okay. Just what you can. And then you can just roll over if that's easier for you, but I want to make sure you can see me. So I'm going to switch sides this way. So same setup, knees at 90. Nothing changes here. Okay. Again, exhale, finding that core, making sure that everything is nice and tight. Squeeze that top knee, lift your foot. Again, placing the thumb in the front of that hip. Make sure it stays soft and squishy. No tension here. Now, you might also find that one side feels a lot harder. Okay, so I get a little bit more pushback from the front of this hip. Burns a little bit extra back here. And that's a good reason why we do some of this single-sided stuff is not, the whole body doesn't need the same stuff all the time. We want to be working in those limited ranges per side, making sure there's no major imbalances. Remember, you're doing 12 on this side as well. This side is so much harder for me, much bigger burn. Really having to tell this hip flexor in the front to stay out of it, stop being a bully. Really concentrating hard on that knee squeeze at the top. Trying not to let my foot turn out too much either. Okay, so again, this side is way harder, but that's what I need. I need that side to be getting its butt kicked and working hard for me, evening out some of that. Okay, so now we are gonna come up to a wall. You can also do this with your foot like on a chair or a bench even. But I'm gonna use the wall. One foot is on the wall. My quads are going to be parallel to each other. Okay, I'm gonna come into a hinge. So my knee stays over my foot, hips push back towards the wall behind me. Now this knee is going to shift towards the floor. Okay, and then as I shift it up, I'm going to open it slightly like a clamshell. Knee in this bend in this knee should stay consistent throughout. I like to use my hands a little bit to help guide that rotation. Also doing 12 here. You're going to feel it on this down leg. You are going to feel it in this side booty. Okay, really making sure, so you almost want to pretend like you have a foam roller between your knees, and as you shift down, you're rolling that foam roller towards the floor. Now, as you shift up, because you're going to open a little bit, that foam roller would ultimately fall. But think about rolling it down, rolling it up. Back foot stays flat on the wall. So don't open that knee so far that you lift your foot. Okay, also doing 12 here. Okay, another way that you can do this is if you have a stability ball, you can place it against the wall and you can do press into it, roll the ball up and down the wall. Okay, just trying to limit equipment use in this workout. Okay, so again, shift down, shift open, shift down, shift open, 12, and then you'll switch. Again, working really hard to make sure that the foot on the wall stays flat throughout the movement. Hinge, knee stays over that hip, quads are parallel, shift down, shift, slight open, shift down, shift, slight open. As you're shifting down, what you're thinking about is that this hip socket is kind of your pivot point at which you are shifting around and shifting open, okay? Again, thinking about as you come down, length on this planted leg, contract to pull it over. Length, contract to pull that hip open. Okay, so this is when you should feel this side booty the most, is when you're open and that knee is coming up. Okay, again, doing 12 on your own count. Shifting down, feeling that length. You can place your hand here and kind of helps give you some of that feedback. Core is still engaged. Okay, opening that knee. Knee stays mostly in that same angle, doesn't change a whole lot in the bend. Okay, now you're gonna come and grab your band. I have it anchored to my dumbbell rack. You can anchor it in a door, around a post in your house, but you're gonna have it at about belly button height, okay? Now you want some tension when you're here, but we're gonna bring those arms back. So you wanna make sure that there's not so much tension that you can't hold those arms back. Because once we pull those arms back, they're gonna stay here the whole time. Okay, feet are about hip width apart, so not super wide. Pull those arms back, and then we're just gonna go into a hinge. Okay, arms are just gonna kind of lower down. Okay, so where my arms are at right now, I'm just gonna kind of drop them straight down, but you're still creating tension in that band, still causing that core to fire a little bit more by having that constant tension. As you go down, they don't need to keep going back, okay? So it's almost like you have a barbell that's coming down right in front of those shins. Hips push back, knees stay over feet. Exhale to stand. Also 12 on your own. Shoulders should be burning a little bit as well to help hold you open. Just make sure that as you pull the shoulders back, you don't arch the back, okay? We don't want an arch back here. So just pull the shoulders back slightly to help hold the cable. As soon as you pull back here, you should feel the core fire a little extra. And then you're keeping that nice length in your spine. Okay, once we've done 12 of those, we're gonna go into some hip thrusts. Now, completely up to you if you wanna add a weight. I'm gonna just show you with body weight. Now, I like to place my fingertips on my hip bone, my thumb on my rib cage, engaging that core. Lower part of rib cage is across the bench, chin is tucked. You're gonna lower down and squeeze up. Now, the reason we put our hands here is because sometimes when we get to the bottom, it's really easy to sag, to push out on the belly, to not keep this good alignment here and not keep that core engaged. Okay, so again, we're doing 12. So counting that on your own, but you want to find, so for me, I have to tuck a little bit. You want to find that neutral pelvis. And then as you lower, the distance between your finger and your thumb should not change. So you're not opening and tucking, okay? You're finding that neutral pelvis, engaging the core, and then holding it in that position. Squeezing the butt at the top. Now, also making sure you're not over thrusting and arching your back at the top. So once you find that neutral pelvis, you're stopping here. Also a good way to use those hands, because if you were to over thrust, the gap between your fingers and your thumbs would increase, okay? You're also gonna feel that a lot more on the lower back if you're not keeping that core tight. So that's another indication that maybe your core isn't staying as engaged. Now, I'm gonna grab some sliders. I have furniture sliders, but on a surface like this, paper towels would work, paper plates. If you're on carpet, paper plates are great, furniture sliders. So whatever you can utilize to help slide on whatever surface you're working with, okay? So it can be towels, socks, shirts, anything that will allow you to slide. Then you're gonna come into a slight athletic stance, okay? So knees are bent, hips are pushed back slightly, core is engaged. And we are going to slide. But what I want you to do is I want you to try and keep your weight centered over both of those feet. Okay, so it should not be like this. Okay, if you're staying centered, you're really having to drag that second foot and feeling that inner thigh. So think about like you're squeezing a beach ball between your legs, coming only as tall as that slight athletic stance, keeping the weight centered, no major leaning. You're gonna do 12 each. So what I want you to think about is every time you lead with a foot, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so then when I go back, it would be 4, 5, 6, all the way up to 12. So that you're leading with each foot 12 times. Okay, and then last but not least, we're gonna go into a sumo squat. For this, I do wanna use a weight. You don't have to. You can use a water bottle or whatever you have handy. I think the common misconception with sumo squats is that they have to be excessively wide, okay? You want your feet just slightly wider than your shoulders and your feet at 45 degrees, okay? And then you're just dropping into that squat. Keep your knees pushing out between big toe, pinky toe, and then think about squeezing that beach ball as you stand between those inner thighs for 12. Okay, and then from here, we're gonna go through this workout again, right? So that is your workout. It's those 6 exercises. Everything is 12. Making sure you're counting on your own. I struggle a little bit to stay perfectly at 12 while I'm communicating and talking and cueing you through everything, okay? So once you've hit 12, go ahead and grab some water if you need it. I just want to check and see if anybody has joined us. Okay. Now, if you are catching the replay, a great thing to do is try and catch these live because I can watch you. I can give you cues. I can help you try different things that might work better for your body, that may not work for somebody else. I can give you feedback because sometimes it feels one way, but we're actually doing something else entirely. So being on these lives, it can be really helpful for you personally to get some of that personalized attention. Okay, so again, now that you've grabbed some water, caught your breath a little bit, we're coming back down into that 90 degrees. Again, if you don't have the mini band, you can still do this. The mini band is just a little bit better, slightly more advanced, so it just depends on where you're at. Again, engage that core, exhale, squeeze and lift, making sure the front of that thigh stays out of the picture. Don't let that toe, foot rotate too high. You're doing 12, magic number 12 today. So again, this side feels just infinitely easier for me. And you might have something similar. Okay, now this is going to be incredibly helpful for mobility at your hips. Yes, you might be feeling a burning sensation. Yes, you might be feeling the muscles working, but we are really trying to help open those hips and allow them to internally rotate. Okay, really helpful for keeping the SI joint pain and low back pain to a minimum by opening and strengthening in the back. I have used this with clients before while they're experiencing some SI joint pain real time to help get it to calm down a little bit. And then sometimes it has made things worse while they are hurting. So just kind of paying attention to that. Maybe today is not the day for this, but maybe when some of that pain has decreased, you can do some of this work and help prevent it from hurting in the future. You can also adjust where your knees are. I like starting in this 90-degree position. It seems to be the most helpful for the most amount of people. But maybe if that hip is kicking in a little too much, you can change the angle of your knees to your hips and see if that makes a difference, if that helps at all. Really making sure you're squeezing down before you lift that foot. And trying not to lose the squeeze as you lift the foot. paying attention. So like for me, sometimes when I lose the squeeze, that's what happens. Sometimes I remember to squeeze, but I lose a little bit of the core tension. And it's just my body's way of trying to compensate to make this side happen, because boy, does it burn. This side is just so much harder, so much more needed. So I really struggle with that internal or external rotation on that side. So it's a great exercise for me to do single leg. Okay, now we're gonna come up to the wall again. We've got those wall airplanes. Okay, remember, foot on the wall, quads parallel to each other, shifting that hip down like you're squeezing a foam roller, opening into a slight clam at the top. Okay, also this is a really good exercise for that glute med, because you should be kind of feeling it in like the side of your back pocket, between like the seam of your pants and your back pocket. Okay, and that glute med is important. So as you can tell, we're shifting here. So it's gonna help your hips here. It's gonna keep you more stable from side to side. It is also helping some of that same kind of mobility in the hips, allowing you to get that full range of motion that you need out of your hips, because your hips just don't work in just that forward and back motion. Your glute med is important for things like running and walking, so that you don't lose your balance when you land on a single leg, so that you don't sink into your hip when you shouldn't, so that you don't hip hike when you shouldn't. Okay, so really good both for strengthening and creating that mobility. Now, similar motion, similar area to what we just did. So now in this second round, this was the side that was much harder for me laying down. This butt is really burning now. I'm feeling it even more in the second round than I did in the first round because of that. Now we're going into those hinges with the band. You don't necessarily need a band to do hinges. What helps with the band is for somebody who's struggling to get their core involved. So again, as soon as you pull back on this band, you should feel that core engage. Remember, band stays near your legs, hinging back, squeezing through the top without over thrusting. That will put too much pressure on your back, take the core out of it, which the whole purpose of the band is to try and get that core to fire a little bit extra without you having to think about it. And the less thinking we can do in some of these exercises, the better. Sometimes if you're thinking about way too much at once, it's really hard to get the movement and what you want out of it correctly. And then this is just a really good one for those of you closer to that new postpartum, when your core is kind of like, I don't want to show up, I haven't showed up, why should I show up today? It's a good way to help them come on board. Okay, sorry, my bench is super noisy and wiggly, not ideal, but totally safe. Okay, so again, I'm finding that neutral pelvis. So for me, I do have to tuck a little bit. Chin is tucked. Everything lowers together, keeping that core engagement. So I really have to focus on making sure, like for me, that I don't tuck from the glutes, I tuck from those lower abs. So I want to think about my pubic bone being pulled up by my core towards my rib cage. Now, the only thing I don't want to see is this. Okay, it's not just here. That's another reason to put your hands on the ribs and the hips, because they should move together. It is not your hips separate than your rib cage. Okay, and then play with how close your feet are to your butt as well, and see how that changes what's working, what you're feeling. And again, you're going for 12. If you're feeling that low back at all, concentrate a little bit more on the core, or maybe we just go to bridges because we're not quite there yet for the hip thrust. Okay, if you're working bridges, you still want to focus on the same things, but maybe a little bit easier for the core than a full hip thrust. Okay, grabbing your sliders, whatever version that looks like. Again, socks would be great on a floor like I'm on. Slight athletic stance, staying over those mid feet, really dragging that second foot, feeling that inner thigh. Squeeze that ball between your legs. Excuse me. As you go, you might find that you feel the other leg as well in that inner thigh, and that's okay. Both of them, if you're keeping your weight centered as best you can, are going to be working. However, I really want most of the focus to be on that drag leg. But if you feel it in both, you're not doing anything wrong. Okay, those inner thighs are really important for helping connect into the core, because they do help the core work. They help stabilize the pelvis. They really, really make a big difference if they're strong or weak. You can tell. Okay, again, that SI joint pain, low back pain, hip pain can all come from having weaker adductors or inner thighs. So strengthening them, especially in an isolated movement, is really important. And semi-single leg versus bilateral, like the sumo squat. But because we're following up those slides with this sumo squat, you might feel those inner thighs a little bit extra on your sumo squat than you might otherwise. Okay. Now, that is your hip focus workout. I highly encourage you to try at least one more round on your own, possibly even two. Really strengthening everything through here, helping you get that mobility, that stability in the movement, in the hips, and allow you to start working towards being pain and symptom free, or preventing pain and symptoms down the road. So really good for those hips, and just in general helps, in the future prevent falls, enables you to get out of chairs without help, allows you to run and walk without pain or issues. So lots of reasons, lots of wonderful reasons to strengthen and stabilize in the hips. And so I really encourage you to try and aim for 4 rounds. Maybe today you do 3, and then next week you do 3, and then the following week you do 3, and then maybe after that you bump it up to 4, okay? Adding weights as you go, adding resistance on your bands as you go, and playing with some of the movements a little bit, okay? And of course, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out and ask. And I look forward to next time, okay? So happy February, enjoy your hips workout, and I will see you around. Bye, guys.